Good morning again. Welcome back from the break. This is our last continuing education presentation. Many of you were aware last week how the stock market fell. I think it fell 500 or 600 on one day and another, 400 or 500 points the next day. And yet the Army Nurse Corps Association investment portfolio is doing just fine. We have made an investment in research in the way of our research and evidence-based practice seed grant program. So this is kind of a shareholders report to let you know how your Army Nurse Corps dollars are being spent, and we have our panelists here to give, in their own words, a snapshot of the ANCA seed grant that they received and where they are now with spending those dollars, and some amazing outcomes are coming to pass in the way of caring for our citizens with dementia, in shaping nursing education, in improving the healthy, working toward a healthy work environment, and also making an impact in advanced practice nurse education. So those are just the broad areas that our grant recipients have dived into. And we're going to have, I'd like to just introduce each of our panelists as they speak, and we'll begin with Lieutenant Colonel retired Jim Cleveland. Jim is a clinical assistant professor and director of the Center for Simulation Innovation at the University of Texas Health Science Center. And I made the mistake, the good judgment to hire Jim. And I served with valor as his department chair for several years. And we had many entertaining and interesting conversations. But Jim is advanced from his role as a faculty member now to being a center director, and we're so proud of him. Jim has a trauma background, and as you can imagine, the students and how they appreciated Jim's real-life scenarios. And also, Jim was director of the 91C program at one time as well at the AMED Center in school. So accompanying Jim will be Dr. Carol White. And Dr. Carol White, I'm going to ask Carol if she would introduce herself when she speaks. And she holds an endowed chair in geriatric nursing and aging studies, and was able to actually work and collaborate with Jim together in the virtual dementia work that they have done. So with that, Jim, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, great. So, good morning, everybody. Sunday morning, only the Nurse Corps. Excellent. Yay. So anyway, Dr. Carol White, myself, we're going to present. Let me just want to say thank you to the group, the ANCA group, for being able to provide this. This was seed money, and I'm going to hopefully show you here in a few minutes what this grant was able to blossom into. And I think it's pretty amazing work, and I can assure you that's why I brought Dr. White along to legitimize it, that I'm not just lying. So you're going to see that something amazing happened with this seed money. And could you introduce yourself, please?
Hi, I'm Carol White. I work at the School of Nursing along with Jim, so you already know what that's like. I lead the Caring for the Caregiver program. We spent a 1 year really just looking at what are the strengths for family caregivers in our city and what are some of the gaps, and based on that we formed our program. We really have only been going for about a year, and our growth has been exponential. And I think the seed money, and that was one of the first grants that we got in that first year, was for purchasing the toolkit for the virtual dementia tour, and that has really, I think, been a core in our program. And Jim will talk a little bit more about that, but it really helps to build empathy among family caregivers and students and the community for what it might be like to live with dementia. One other thing I want to just mention is that the VA has just recently, it's been announced by the federal government that the VA in San Antonio has become a center of excellence for family caregiving among veterans. So I think that's really important to advance, not only for members of our community, non-VA, but also for veterans in San Antonio to support family caregivers.
So the piece I brought, obviously, if it's trauma and emergency care, you're like, well, what about this dementia piece? But I always, unfortunately, those of us in acute care, you see the end result when you see systems are broken, and you see when families are coming in disarray, and just seeing it as a broken system. So my part was on the front side of this, was the kind of just putting it together, because for my observation was you have all these family caregivers that are really strapped down. We'll cover the small stats that are involved with it, but they're the ones that do almost all the care. And my piece was our community forgets those caregivers long before their loved one ever forgets their name. And I thought, wow, we really need to kind of lean in and be able to make that difference and take care, letting the caregivers know they're really not alone when they're doing this arduous job of taking care of a loved one. So that's where I weighed in on this, but let's go ahead and go to the next slide. So we're seated in with the Alzheimer's organization. Oh, by the way, sales pitch, what are you guys doing next Saturday morning? The Alzheimer's walk. Come on and join us. So it'll be at 8 o'clock in the morning, and come on out and walk. Okay, there's a little commercial. So with that said, you can see that the slogan is basically that we want to do away with Alzheimer's. Now that's a lofty goal. I don't know if it'll ever be attained, but why not try, and why not lean in? So facts about the caregivers: greater than 75% are the primary care providers for their loved ones. And it's a long goodbye. Those of us, and 6 degrees of separation is probably too much. I know Alzheimer's has touched us almost directly, if not indirectly, but 75% are there. And of course they want to be there. And that was the piece when we looked at in San Antonio. You have the military families where we're kind of, this is a big room. I mean, all my old bosses and colleagues are in here. But anyway, with that said, we're our own family. But yet we're still, as far as long-term support, a lot of us, the military, as we relocate, don't have that systemic family support. And then you have the Latino portion of San Antonio with a lot of spirituality piece attached to it, but they are not prone to want to look for outside help to come in. And then you just have your cosmopolitan portion of San Antonio. So you have these different areas. So the community doesn't have one fix. The community needs really an opportunity for us to be able to reach in and talk to those that, what do you need? Not, this is what we got, this is what you like. So that was one thing with Dr. White's group now, is we're getting ready to tailor the care. And first part is to get everyone in touch with what dementia is, even those that take care, because it gets very frustrating. Is anyone taking care of a family member it gets, even though you love it dearly, you get frustrated. You get very frustrated. It's like, right, me working for you, right? So anyway, so you try to, it's a deep topic, so we try to keep it as light as possible. So again, here's the seed money, the ANCA seed money right here. You provided the initial first steps that we were able to take with offering our community support. And that's kind of what I've become in the CSI. If you ever get a chance to come see us in the CSI, the simulation center, it's a very large group, and it's a large space. So I'm kind of a gatekeeper now for the functions when they bring the family members in. But it isn't just, this is one piece of what the Dementia Care Tour basically embraces.
Can I just add in here?
No, come on.
So I think, as Jim said, this really was the core, getting the money to support developing a group who knew how to deliver the virtual dementia tour, which is empathy training. So we often offer it alone, and we could be out every day doing it, because it's amazing, and Jim will give some of the feedback when people take it. But we offer that within the context, which I think is really unique. We've had last month, we had people drive from Houston to take our skills training. They said, we can't find this. So in the simulation, Jim has generously allowed us to have the space where we do hands-on training for family caregivers. I think with dementia, it's really particularly important. If you have a stroke and you go to the hospital, the whole rehab team kind of meets with you. Maybe you probably need a refresher when you go home. But with the with Alzheimer's or other forms of dementia, you gradually take on more care over time, and sometimes you've never had the team talk to you about it. So we have an interprofessional team with OT, nursing, dental, speech language pathology, nutrition, who come together and help family caregivers. We offer the virtual dementia tour, and actually now the next step we're doing, especially with the community, is to offer what's called a Dementia Friends program, to say, okay, now you've learned about what it might be like to live with dementia. What are you going to do about it? What are some actions you can take in your community for your neighbors, for your cousin, for whomever? So we've taken that seed money, and now we're actually developing all of that into a more contiguous piece for people in the community, for family caregivers.
And if any of you really are interested, come see us after the presentation, and there's room for a lot of people in this tent. Actually, we have more room than we have people right now to help us on our future mission. So the grant helped us begin. So you can see that we've done numerous trainings, and once again, even though the grant started, we had to get trained, we had to get everyone in place, and we had to then get our community of interest. So little comments that you get for the most part, though, is it's a great experience. And I experienced some of the folks actually get angry. We had one member who actually became completely, I would say, the what? Yeah, well, I guess that's a good word too, unhinged. But she did become very concerned because I hated it. But what she hated was the fact that she really was unaware of what was happening and was absolutely confused. And you'll see a little bit of the video snippets. This is exactly what that simulation was supposed to achieve. So it's amazing work, and it's a brief simulation, but it makes the point go across. And again, with all simulation, all the learning happens in the debrief. The active moment's very important, but it's the debrief is where that aha moment really comes to task. So I'm going to show a video real quickly. It's been publicized pretty well, I think. We've been received well within the community. So I'll start off. Hopefully this will work.
An estimated 50 million people worldwide live with dementia or Alzheimer's disease. And most of the time, the bulk of the load caring for these people falls upon family members. An innovative new program at the UT Health School of Nursing enables caregivers to feel what it's like to have dementia. It's called the Virtual Dementia Tour. Let's go out to the UT Health School of Nursing and find out for ourselves what it's like to have dementia.
At the School of Nursing, we're presenting the Virtual Dementia Tour. It's a simulation training that allows the person that goes through it to have a sense of what a person with dementia is living with, to experience, to feel that experience. They'll understand what it's like not to be able to understand instructions for someone. Someone tells you what to do and you don't really understand what they're telling you, to not be able to see clearly. As people progress with dementia, they often lose their peripheral vision, and so that's the glasses the person is wearing means that they can't see off to the side. They have gloves on their hands, which means they can't manipulate things very well, which simulate what it might be like to have some neuropathies. So it really gives them a sense of what trying to trick their mind to be in the world of that person with dementia.
When I entered the room, the only word that I truly remembered was flashlight, which I interpreted as to flash the light. So when I came in the room, I just went to the switch and I flashed the light. My mother and several of her sisters had Alzheimer's. Maybe I should have been a little more patient.
Critical for students because it gives them a better sense of what the patient that they're caring for is experiencing.
As a nursing student, it definitely gives us an insight of what dementia patients are going through. So it kind of helps us. We can't really say we know what they're going through, but it definitely makes us understand, and we can care better for them, just because we know they might be experiencing different symptoms and things like this that we can really understand.
So you have people doing whatever, and it looks just like a nursing home day room where everyone's walking around doing their own thing, making up their own rules, and it's chaos, and it's really interesting to see. With that, I would like to say, oops, got to get to the next slide. There we go. So again, I want to thank you all absolutely for the support, the seed money. It really opened up something phenomenal, and it's still growing by leaps and bounds. And I want to thank all of you that are involved with putting that grant through, and the 20 or 30 pages I had to write for it, and and the timelines. It was great. No, absolutely. It's an amazing process, and I want to thank all of you. And I can't thank Colonel Hebner enough for her kind years, and so many of you out there, to see you again, and those that I work for, and you guys didn't crush me, so thank you. So, and anything?
I just would add one last thing. I'd like to acknowledge Debbie James, who is a faculty member at the School of Nursing, who Jim and I work closely with, and she's really taken the lead. Jim wrote the 20 pages and the grant, and then Debbie was a faculty member who's taken this over, and we're actually next week, I think there might be 7 or 8 more facilitators that are being trained, because that's the demand we have, including from University Health System, so that they will be able to offer it in their acute care to their nurses, so they understand when someone comes in with a fractured hip and they don't understand the underlying dementia, that they really know how to respond to that individual. So I also want to thank you for your support, and thank you, Dr.
Are there any questions, or we'll handle those later?
Thank you so much, Colonel Cleveland and Dr. White. Our next speaker is Major Sabas Salgado currently is director of the Flight Paramedic Program at the AMED Center and School. He's just recently been placed in his 2-year command, and just started within the last few weeks. When Captain Salgado at that time applied for his seed grant, he was clinical nursing OIC of the burn clinic at the United States Army Burn Center Institute of Surgical Research. And Captain, now Major Salgado, please join us at the lectern, and he's going to tell us a little bit about the improvements made possible in burn patient resuscitation.
All right, good morning, everybody. My name is Sabas Salgado, and I want to thank you. I want to thank all the ANCA members for providing the seed money, which started as a dream 3 years ago to this project. It started at USISR, and USISR is a wonderful place for those of you guys who've been there. Is you have an idea, and there's the word no doesn't exist there, right? Because you have an idea, they say run with it. So that's what happened with here. This started as a PI project, and then turned into research, and then with the help of ANCA, it became this research project. I also want to thank you for the money. I want to thank also people to note is Colonel Retired Mansalinas, Colonel Van Fossen, Colonel Schroeder, and Dr. Cancio for their continued support. And here you go. All the people, I can't take credit for the project on my own. Everybody on this PowerPoint slide was part of this journey. And those of us that most of them couldn't be here, but every one of them was key members in this project. Disclaimer, I have nothing to disclose. The vision of this project came from an app concept. We got warfighters in the current generation, and the current generation, they spend hours on their phone, right? So we see that now. I see that now at the schoolhouse. And when they get down range, we give them a critical care nurse or nurse transition program, and then deploy them. And when they're out there in the field, and where do they turn to? They don't have anything. Sometimes the peers next to them are just as young as them, and they're trying to figure out the solutions. So we wanted to create a tool that resonated with this current generation in the battlefield. And in the battlefield of the future, the multi-domain battle operations, there will be no Wi-Fi connectivity. So that's it. Whatever they have is what they have. So I said, well, there's an app for that. We're going to make it. Next, in order to create this, that we needed to have a real-world situation. So we had a real-world situation. We had a Simman 3G, and we covered them to simulate the burn patient. So we took 3866 Sierra and Tango students from AMED for our study, and to help them to see if this app would they would be able to do a mock-specific, burn mock-specific code. Everyone was gracious enough to help me in this project. Even regulatory jumped on board. They graciously were arriving the day of the study to audit me. So my plan to hand out candy and gift cards in order to get participants failed at that point. So I ended up with 10 participants. Let me see. There we go. So the point of randomization. So they were asking, regulatory asked a lot of questions. Randomization, and I'm not a PhD prepared nurse. So I grabbed a bunch of numbers in a little bowl and shook them around, and I kept looking at them, and they kind of gave me the thumbs up. I'm like, all right, let's do this. Let's do this. Let's randomized study. So we loaded a lot of firsts in this project for me. So we loaded the Velocity app on the software on the tablets. Next, the results. The three groups that we decided to check, we had a group of 3 with the Velocity View app, one group with no checklist, and one group with checklist. The sample size was small, so are statistically insignificant. And we had also average system usability scale for those with paper checklist and those with the app. And we got a 3.8. And then we got one with a velocity, that was 4.2. And for the velocity view was 3.8 usability. Limitations. Changes that people in research don't tell you challenges is Murphy's Rule, right? So Murphy's Rule exists. So the day of the data collection, we created the app and tested it on an Apple tablet. The money that we got from ANCA was for Android tablets. So when we downloaded the app it worked in the App Store, but then when we did it with it crashed. It crashed. So one of the members took a 1 hour ride to Austin, and we went through 6 hours of code. 6 hours of code to fix that. This is the day before. Yeah, everything was set. But that's a learning experience, right? Yeah. So adapt and overcome. So the discussion piece. During the projects, we learned many things, and we found that the app, I think, is a valuable tool for the future. And this is just a pilot, but it should be further developed for our current generation to try to find real-world problems. Is my sales pitch. Everyone in this room helped create this project. And if you have not done so, please visit the ANCA table in the back and buy something to keep supporting young researchers like myself. So, thank you. Thank you guys.
I didn't mention that Major Salgado has his MBA, so you can see what an entrepreneur he is as well. Thank you, Major Salgado. Our next speaker is Lieutenant Colonel Andrea Fuller. She is going to be retired in just a couple of weeks, and unless there's a stop loss for some reason. No. Just kidding. Lieutenant Colonel Fuller is an assistant professor in the Family Nurse Practitioner program at the Daniel K. Inouye Graduate School of Nursing Uniformed Services University of the Health Sciences in Bethesda. She holds her BSN from East Carolina University, her Master's in Nursing from University of South Carolina, or Katie. Let's see, Katie, are you still here? South Carolina, and Doctorate of Nursing Practice from Vanderbilt University. Her areas of interest include curriculum inclusion of the sexual minority patient in nurse practitioner education and the evaluation of the present state of the DNP capstone project. Colonel Fuller, we invite you to come.
Good morning, everybody. I feel very honored and privileged to be among this group of distinguished people. As Carol mentioned, been an Army nurse for a while now, and getting ready to hang up the uniform, but definitely will continue on with ANCA because I see what great things they do. So this morning, I'd like to talk to you about my project, which is care of the LGB patient, what is included in nurse practitioner education. So early in my tenure at USU, Dean Romano asked, what are we doing to prepare our nurse practitioners in caring for this population? And I raised my hand and said, I'll take on that project. Yeah. You quickly learn that the cookbook's not out there, and you've got to create the cookbook. So these are my disclosures. And I probably should make a few more disclosures up here today. Number one, since I'm retiring, it's safe to tell everyone that Barbara Ramsey is my sister. Thank you, sister. And I also had a pony, and she did not. So there it is, the ugly truth. The ugly truth. I had the foresight to be born the last in the family of 5, not the first. So, all right. So the purpose of the study was to gain a better understanding of the current state of the curriculum in preparation of our nurse practitioners in LGB health-related topics. As I kind of mentioned, when I went to the literature, I thought it was going to be a slam dunk and it would be an easy venture, but for most of us that have a curious mind, we quickly realized that we have to prepare the literature, and we had to produce the knowledge base. So there was very little in the literature concerning this, and one good study in undergraduate nursing, some in medical school, and one in PA education. Many studies concerning attitudes about caring for this population, but not about curriculum. So I started out with a focus group of nurse practitioner faculty. Now, full disclosure, I did not start out with a focus group format or methodology. What I did start out with was I was going to survey all program directors of all AACN faculty in nurse practitioner programs across the U.S. I was going to do it by survey, and I had a very nice tool designed, and I applied for IRB in July. In October, my IRB person called me up and said, you can't query people outside of the DOD. Are you aware of the Paperwork Reduction Act of 1999? Anybody? Anybody read it? Anybody? Let me surmise it for you. It's this thick. And basically what it tells you is, yeah, that's it. You can't survey anyone outside the DOD without OMB permission, and that's, very hard to come by. I walked down the hall to some of my PhD colleagues and said, hey, have you ever heard of the Paperwork Reduction Act of 1999? And they all held their heads and went, no. So had to refocus my methodology to that of a focus group. And Carol was my cheerleader through this whole thing. Okay, so you might ask, why do we need to teach this specific population, this specific topic? Well, in primary care, we always look at risk reduction and population-based care. In the sexual minority population, we know that they avoid oftentimes health care, and especially in the military, they avoid health care because of our history, or their history, and now becoming more accepted. But the other part of that is they've learned that maybe our primary care providers aren't as schooled as they need to be in caring for their different risk factors. So as you can see from the slide, in gay and bisexual men, depression's a higher rate than that of the general population, and obesity is a higher than average in lesbian and bisexual women. Both looking at across the spectrum, maybe if I change the slide, you'd be able to see that. Across the spectrum, both alcohol use and tobacco use are at a higher rate. So from a primary care perspective, of course, we look at chronic disease of diabetes, heart disease, stroke, hypertension, whatever. So that's why it's an important piece to discuss in preparation for a nurse practitioner in primary care. So, just a quick surmise of my study. Those are my photos from Pride Week. They're really great down there. So the question I started out with was asking the faculty members how many hours they dedicated to LGB health-related topics. I didn't really expect to get a hardcore answer. I wanted to get a swag. And what I was more going for was, did they feel this was a time burden? As you can see, one program answered 0. They had not included any information in their curriculum as yet, so they were interested in the project because they wanted to know how. And then there was one university that actually has access to a Pride clinic, so they get quite a bit of time working with this population with their students. So that was a great benefit. When asked what kind of teaching methods they utilized in their curriculum, you heard the standard ones such as lectures and group discussions, but some more type of creative ways such as simulated patients. As you heard this morning, we do use simulation quite a bit. This is a great way to break the ice with the students. You bring them into the simulation center and you present them with a patient that they're able to practice what we've taught them before they got into the real world and have to face it for the first time. They also when asked how they evaluated this teaching, they used, of course, written exam, but they also in the simulated sector, in the simulated center, and the peer-to-peer practice, they used both faculty observation, peer-to-peer evaluation, and the simulated patient observation. In keeping with the literature, most of the programs interdisperse the information throughout their curriculum, and that is what's suggested in the literature. They also put it in different programs such as ethics. We use it at USU. We put it in both our adult and our pediatric courses. We treat it like any other population. We intertwine it within the curriculum. So what the faculty wanted to talk about most was what do they need. And I think this is the most important piece of this study, is it was a starting off point to see what is out there. What does best practice look like? But before we can get to best practice, we need to build the foundation. And so what the faculty really wanted, they were really in favor of adopting a standardized curriculum. That's going to take some time and effort to do. Of note, the National Organization of Nurse Practitioner Faculty Special Interest Group has already developed a toolkit for transgender care. So hopefully we'll be able to carry on in their model and produce the same with the other populations. As far as faculty preparation, they were really interested in that. They were watching webinars on their own, of course reading on their own, but they really wanted more preparation in delivering this subject. Most programs did not have access to a Pride or an LGBT specific clinic. They really wanted to build some community partnerships in doing so. And then, of course, they want to see this move forward. Because of this project, I was able to present this at the American Academy of Nurse Practitioners this past spring. Generated a lot of interest, and further on with my original plan to include transgender studies, through my whole dealings with the OMB, And IMCO, I was told that I needed to take transgender out of the mix because there was some litigation pending with the DOD. So my project became LGB no T. I did find someone at the AAMP that completed a study on transgender, and we are going to partner in order to take this subject further and hopefully develop some curriculum component to it. So that is all I have today. Thank you.
Colonel Fuller is one of those researchers who really did run into the bureaucratic, real-world regulatory constraints in research, and she really did weather the storm. And also, Major Schmidt, our next speaker, has also run into delays and snags, and she keeps persevering. And I'd like to introduce Major Patricia Schmidt. You met her yesterday on the panel. She is a member of the Center for Nursing Science and Clinical Inquiry. Her critical care background and burn background have given her an interest in the relationships in acute and intensive care work environments. So, Major Schmidt.
Good morning, everyone. It's good to see you again. As Dr. Huebner had mentioned, I'm kind of in the middle of the hurricane right now of bureaucracy. And hopefully, though, we're at the tail end of it. We're hoping to get started with the actual data collection of this study in December. But I'll get to that in a moment. And I'd like to thank ANCA for the seed money because the seed money is it's in congruence with a TSNRP grant that I put together this study, and I'm using the ANCA money to help with getting the people to participate in the study because I'm going to be asking a lot of nurses who are going to be participating. So to get started, I'm studying what's called affect contagion. And what that is how moods and emotions spread amongst a group of people. And I did this during my dissertation work, and I want to move it to the clinical environment. So what we're doing is I've moved it to the burn center at the ICU there, and we're studying how the moods and emotions of the staff members there impact their ability to deliver patient care. We're using social network analysis, which I talked a little bit about yesterday morning, to understand those relationships. So how do people interact with each other? And then I'm also using natural language processing, which is one of those big data things that we talked about very briefly yesterday. And what that is, in this particular case, is there's natural language processing computers have the ability to, out of our free text notes, be able to sense the sentiment or the affect of the person who wrote the note. And there's a little bit of literature that has supported that the context or the sentiment that a person puts in their free text note actually can predict the rate of readmissions. So they did this, the original studies were done in medical surgical patients. And if you think about it, people try to say, I'm neutral when I write my notes. I don't try and put any sort of sentiment in it. But you do, whether or not you want. And the thing about it is that people wouldn't be discharged if the person really thought that they weren't ready to go and they were being putting the sentiment in intentionally, right? We would keep them in the hospital longer so that they were better, so that they wouldn't come back. So these computers are now able to sense that, and what I'm trying to do is validate it against what the nurses tell me. So I will be collecting data from the nurses and then comparing it to what the computer tells me their sentiment is. So why is this important to us, right? Why is this a military important question in particular? Well, we get deployed, and when we get deployed, we're basically given a family that we're going to live with for at least 6 months of people who we didn't choose to live with. And you have to be able to get along, and you have to be able to communicate in the best interest of your patients. So if we can understand what we can either do to manipulate the environment to make that the best work environment for them so that they can get along, or if there might be skills that we can give them ahead of time, or if we know that in certain circumstances there's kind of personality traits, kind of like a Myers-Briggs, where these people are not going to get along no matter what, so maybe they shouldn't be put together on the same team that's deploying. These are all things that this research could potentially help with in the future. We chose the burn ICU for a couple of reasons. One, it is a fairly high stress environment. Two, it's a pretty well controlled environment because it's smaller, so there's only about 100 people who could potentially participate in the study, and the control of who's coming and going during the study time is a little bit easier to capture. And then three, I'm looking at patient events so that we have some time markers, and they have the types of patient events that I'm looking at are patient death, as well as being put on CRRT or ECMO, and these kinds of events happen more frequently in the burn ICU than they do in some of the other ICU environments. So for that reason, it gives us the likelihood of that to happen for the time stops more frequently, so that the study doesn't have to be drawn out. So what am I collecting? Each of the staff members who are participating are going to provide me with their friendships. So I'm going to give them a roster of all the staff members they work with, and they're going to tell me how frequently they spend time with that person outside of work. I'm also giving them an option to tell me that they avoid that person, because that can be the case too. And so seeing that also could impact the way that work environment works. I also look at how susceptible they are to the emotions of the people around them, as well as how expressive they are of their own emotions to everyone around them. And then there's also the 10-question pre and post shift affect questions. So that is basically a list of 10 adjectives that they are going to provide, I'm feeling this way or I'm not feeling this way to me, at the beginning of their shift and at the end of their shift. Hence, I need them to stay in the study and participate. And so enticing them is hopefully going to help. But basically, if they're going to participate, I'm trying to make it as easy as possible. So the staff interactions are also going to be included. So we'll be looking at shift assignments as well as in their notes. So if someone charts on somebody else's patient, I'm presuming that they're having some sort of interaction and not just going into a patient's room willy-nilly and doing stuff with them. I'm also going to be looking at the clinical notes and their patient outcomes, and we'll be collecting those retrospectively through their charts. And then a life history calendar, which is how we're going to be marking time for any big events that occur, not only with the patients, but also within the unit. So if they're having some sort of hail and farewell, they have cookies once a month that come up. Some volunteers bring cookies around, so that day is going to be documented to see if those kinds of things possibly impact the way that the staff affect spreads, and then also the way their patient care occurs. And then at the end, when we document those patient events, we have a questionnaire to provide context to those events. Because when you have a patient death, you can have the death of a young soldier who you've been working on really hard and not wanting them to go yet, or you can have the death of an elderly person and it's been dragging on and you've been waiting for their family to finally come to the reality that this patient is ready to go. And the response of the nursing staff, I would expect to be different between those two types of patients. So, some lessons learned, because we have not started any of this data collection yet. I've been preparing for the last year and a half. So the IRB is not the only approval process. I received my IRB approval last April, it only took about 6 months to get through that. But because I am doing a survey of staff employees, government employees, I have to go through a survey process that's through OMB. And that process took a year. I received confirmation from them in September. Part of the reason it took a year is because some of the information I'm requesting, like full names of staff members, I request their cell phone number because I'm going to be texting them that survey that they do every morning and night, because this is going to be a paperless study, and making it most convenient for the staff member to complete the survey means putting it on their phone. And so to get permission to use the phones, I also had to go through another Privacy Act process that went all the way up through AMED and MedCom, had to get signatures through them, then it had to go over to the OMB office and get signatures through the security offices at the Department of the Army so that they could answer questions on their phone. personal phone off time of work, but because it's military sponsored and they're all military employees, we have to go through this process. And then the final piece of it has to do with the ethics of the social network. I'm trying to have a data management person, so a third party, do all of the de-identification for the privacy of the staff members, and I've run into a whole lot of hiccups with that. So that's the last piece that I'm working on right now. I should be through with it next week. According to the IRB, we should be able to get it through for the next week, and then my amendments can be reviewed and approved, and we should be able to start doing data collection in December. But that's kind of where we're at, and just like Sabas and everybody else up here, Murphy always shows up whenever you want to do something new. And again, thank you for the support, and thank you for what you guys do, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak today. Thanks.
At this time, we'd like to take any questions that you might have. Again, just remembering Jim and Carol with their work with virtual dementia tour, Sabas with burn rehabilitation, Colonel Fuller with her LGB period, work with the advanced practice curricula, and Major Schmidt with very interesting and intriguing affect contagion. So, questions you may have or comments?
Amazing as work gets done. With all the regulations
Good morning, Major Lightfoot. I'm an ER nurse here at BAMC. I had a question for Dr. White. I actually have a meeting with you. What are the hours of the simulation center, and is there a cost involved?
Well, that would be my question.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry.
So, I rent space to her. No.
Okay.
No, you just make contact with either one of us, and we'll figure out something. Don't worry about that. Okay. I'm there till almost midnight every night. I am. We're there. I have coverage from almost like 6 something in the morning till about midnight, so I'm open.
Okay.
So
I asked because
just whenever you want to come in, come in.
Yeah, I think it's great research, great idea, especially as an ER nurse. Sometimes you hear the words jaded, compassion fatigue, or, we sometimes forget what that patient with Alzheimer's or dementia is going through, and I've seen some of my nurses, get frustrated because someone's trying to pull out an IV or, not following directions, and just, I feel like putting them through the simulation will kind of give them an understanding, refresh their understanding of what that person's going through. So I think that's a great.
Can I just make one other comment? I think apropos your question and comment working in the eMERGE, I think that's really important. Usually someone who has a diagnosis of dementia or a condition, that's not what takes them to the hospital usually. It's a broken hip, it's a urinary tract infection, it's medication management. So there is a movement to work with acute care hospitals, because at any given time, 1 of 4 people in an acute care has a diagnosis of dementia, but that's often not recognized. So helping staff, and we did some focus groups at the University Health System to really try to understand from their perspective, the nurses and the patient technicians who are caring for these patients, what do they need for support? And education was huge.
Yes, and for the families as well. So it's a good resource to provide to our families if they're trying to get an understanding of what their mom or dad or relative or friend is going through as well. So thank you, and I'll get in contact with you to go through that. Major Salgado, did I say that right? How much training did the participants get prior to utilizing the app to conduct the code or to record on the code?
They were all 68 Sierra and 68 Tango students. We did that for a reason. We wanted somebody who was not exposed to critical care, recently had information, versus our seasoned nurses already, it does that muscle memory, right? But we're getting to the point where we have a lot of new nurses, they come out of the course, they send them to the floors, and they may or may not deploy. So we had that mindset. And also the idea was to grab the app and then take it to our 68 whiskeys. A lot of our 68 whiskeys get to SOCOM. They get sent out, right, with Special Operations Command. So you have a lot of these guys where they're put into situations, they got a backpack, and whatever they're humping, that's it, right? And there's a lot of products that come out, and they say, well, add this and add this. Well, that's that Joe that has to carry that stuff. And if there's a situation, he's got to find a resource. And what was that resource is that app. They spend 6 to 8 hours, right? I'm exaggerating, 4 to 6 hours a day on their phones. These 17, 18-year-olds. And 17, 18-year-olds next year, that's the force. That's it. So we got to adapt something to them.
I agree. So right now we're piloting the trauma teams, are the T6 trauma, and being an experienced ER nurse and working with that app, I still miss steps when we're going through our traumas. So that's why I was asking. We've been through training. They've been on the floor going through it with us, and I still miss stuff. I still miss stuff when we compare our paper documentation to the app. So that's why I was curious as to how much training did those participants get with the app, getting familiarized with where everything is prior to actually running the mock code.
They had zero. We just say, here you go.
Hello, Lieutenant Reagan. I just wanted to thank Dr. Fuller for the work that you're doing. Part of being a nurse is advocating for your patients, but if we're not even receiving the education on how to treat these patients, where do we begin? And I think many of us can recall a moment where you're taking care of a patient who is from the LGBT community, and you see other nurses or staff not calling them by their pronoun. And about the only thing I learned in nursing school is that they're reluctant to receive care because they feel they're not understood. And then you actually see it where they really aren't. So I really appreciate what you're doing.
Thank you. Yes, that's the essence of the problem. We're not prepared. We always think of the STI increase in the population, but we don't consider other things that population needs care of. So at USU, I was able to integrate the learning across the spectrum, starting with their first course loads in health assessment, where they learn how to take a proper assessment of any person that walks in, making it inclusive language-wise. And then spreading that throughout the curriculum, from adult health to pediatrics to women's health, in simulation. We always have our standard simulation patients. Well, all we have to do is switch things up a little bit and make that simulated patient a gay male or a lesbian woman, and then that tweaks their memory a little bit to think of other things they need to evaluate. But you're right, we need to build the trust as primary care providers and as nurses that we are adequately prepared to take care of them, and they don't have to go to specialty clinics. My hope is one day all the Pride clinics will close because there will no longer be a need for them.
Hey, good morning. My question is for Major Smith. So with your work, ma'am, I know something that seems to be behind, at least for the Army, for smaller teams, is sometimes we're treating people based on a cultural fit, especially for like FSTs and FRSTs that are coming out now, because it's so small, and you have to work and live with these people if you deploy. Or you're on that team for 3 years. Do you think that your research is going to start pushing forward that these teams now can get people that they think culturally will fit with their teams, where commanders can be more hand selective?
Not very quickly, but because nothing moves very fast in the Army. But yes, I actually have just put in a grant for another study that is looking at consistency in teams, and so that's a collaboration I'm doing with Weill Cornell Medical School, and starting with OR teams and how patient outcomes are affected by the consistency of the team members. But when you start to put those two studies together and say that, if we have people who are consistent and reliable and they know each other well, but we have things in place to make sure that they're using their proper checklists so that they don't miss steps, and then also put that together with they have compatibility based on cultural reasons or their affect, etc., we're going to be able to build much stronger teams that are going to be effective for a 3-year period instead of getting burnt out from having to spend that much time together.
To hear kind of where the rubber meets the road, to use a poor analogy, maybe more vision turns to reality, where we have money invested in real research that's going to really give us some great outcomes. And I think to hear this morning is really something that's important for us as the Army Nurse Corps Association. And the research piece that Carol and her group have worked on to really enrich has been very important. We did a lot of work over the years with education and scholarships, and now we've branched out into this world of research even more, and I think it's going to become even more exciting. And so I appreciate all the work you guys have done.